Hey everyone, my name is Tony. This is my first video. Um, so where should I start? I guess my intention for starting this channel is I'm a licensed therapist. I do a lot of group therapy for younger kids, teenagers. I've worked with families, I've worked with adults, I've done couples counseling. So currently I help run 3 groups, and the group sizes are from like 4 to 10 typically on days right now with COVID currently and stuff. And I partly am making these series for those kiddos I see that this is always going to be on YouTube. So if they have me for counseling or have me in group for group counseling, they can always watch these lessons and then reflect back on them. So one thing I asked anyone who is watching these, I hope someone listens and gets anything out of them. I want to make this channel as a part of a community. I also want to, I really want to help anyone who's out there that feels like they need, someone additionally in their support system. It doesn't mean I'm going to be your counselor at all or anything like that. This is kind of coming from an informed civilian. I wouldn't ethically be able to be your counselor, but I'm here for anyone who just needs some information or just needs someone for some feedback, I guess. So a lot of these are going to be kind of one take kind of thing, so if I mess up or if I say anything silly or I have to repeat myself, I apologize. This is kind of like almost like a ranting like I do in my groups. But hope someone, as long as one person gets to utilize these and it benefits someone, I'm okay with that. As anyone can see, I'm actually in my basement. This is kind of like where I game, I do art, I do all those things I talk about self-care. And so my first lesson, I have a curriculum that I do for 6 months, and my first lesson is about self-care and caring for others. So that's really important to start with when I work with someone, especially younger people, because when I usually get the kiddos that I serve, the world has given them every reason to not care for other people. Their families more likely let them down in some way. So we first have to help them care for themselves and then hopefully care for other people. So why is caring for yourself important? It's because frankly you can't care for other people if you don't care for yourself. I mean, let me put it differently, you can, but you can't sustain that. And that's something that's probably you've heard of that, but it's something that we talk about but we don't apply. For example, there's a lot of, so when I start this, like with my kids at where I work, I asked you to, like I said earlier, have a journal. So a lot of these things I'm going to throw out there are already out there. There's information everywhere, just a Google away. So when I say something, I want you to write it down, take notes, and I want you to explore those concepts and things we talked about further. So, like anyone who has studied psychology, they talk about Freud and the id, ego, and superego. So the reason I bring that up is because the id, it is very selfish, right? It wants you to meet your needs, and it doesn't really care if, in a way, how it's going to affect other people. So why is that important? I know that I've already said that, but you need to care for other people. So when people don't care for themselves first, though, they lose sight of those selfish needs that we have to have. We have to be selfish sometimes, right? We can't always help other people, and we feel good and we have purpose in that, and that's a good part of why we're here in this journey in life. But you can't if you're the one bearing all the weight, eventually you will give out. And those people who just depend on you will then be lost in that process. So you have to be selfish, and you have to take care of yourself, and you have to value yourself first to come to that conclusion, or to that statement, that belief. Not to say you shouldn't put yourself out there and help other people, or you have to always not give yourself some kind of not to mean discomfort, or you know what I mean, like to go extra out of the ordinary and help someone, but you have to make sure yourself is protected first. So to go back a little bit, there's a lot of things we're going to touch on. So I already touched on id, ego, and superego. So we have to listen to our id. We have to be selfish sometimes. We have to listen what it's telling us. Now with the kids, I call it the id monster, but it's not a monster at all. It's just our desires, right? What we want. Now, how we tame what we want is that ego and superego part. The ego is basically your concept of yourself in this reality. It is started and developed since you were born. So, for example, think of it as an avatar in a video game. So all those gamers like me, when you select that avatar, you start with level 1, right? And from that level 1, you grow with experiences, and you become more powerful, you learn new skills, and you learn. Think about when you first start a game, you're new, you don't know anything. So what do you tend to do when you start a new game? You make a lot of mistakes. I do. I enjoy that. I like figuring out what I did wrong, and I'll go back and replay it. But unfortunately, life, not all the time can you replay something. You have to just kind of learn from that mistake and keep going forward. So, and that's the helpful mindset, because people who always look back and all those mistakes and all those things they've messed up, and they never be able to move forward with that, they get stuck, right? I have this regret. I should have done this and this and this, but I'm getting a little bit off topic here. But anyways, so your ego knows what the rewards and consequences for your actions are. That's why when you see a little kid, they don't know that yet. That's why they call it the terrible twos. They are figuring that out. Now, that's why as a job as a parent is to lay down those boundaries and that structure so they can learn that. So that's one way that we get our choices get filtered, is through our ego. Another way is that superego part. Think of this as your values, your morality, you learning and believing something is wrong or right. So a lot of times when even we have a benefit to something, if our values tell us it's wrong, it keeps us from doing that. And there's sometimes when we believe that there's nothing wrong with that, but if there's consequences for that, that'll keep us from doing it. For example, fishing, right? I like fishing. Hope other people like fishing. Some people believe it's not right for the government to require you to have a license to go fish. But they will still get a license because what is the consequence? Getting caught and paying a fine. You don't want to do that. So, that's through those experiences we learn, right? And through those experiences, that child development, and we have child stages. So there's a guy named Erik Erikson, really interesting fellow. I don't think he had any. He had a lot of experience, but I don't think he had like college experience. But he was a very genius, you know. So he has 7 stages. The first stage. Excuse me for a second. The first stage is trust and mistrust of the world. So, a lot of the kiddos that we serve have learned to mistrust the world and other people. So, then they no longer care for other people because they have not been there for them, right? So, And later in the video, we'll go through the other stages. So, and also through those experiences, we can learn that to not value ourselves, to not. I think it's the second stage. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but it talks about how we can build confidence and independence, or we can learn to depend on others. I believe it's the second stage. I think it's 1 to 3 age. And so the parents are not have a bad intention for this. They do this because when we have kids, we tend to have kids it instantly gives us purpose, right? But if we don't have the kids and we don't keep in mind what's best for them in the long run, we tend to do things that fulfill our own needs in the moment. For example, dressing our kids and making choices for our kids, who are even in that young age from 1 to 3, they will depend on us to make those decisions, right? Versus someone who can learn to figure things out for themselves partially, can learn independence and confidence in their choices, right? And so that's part of how we learn, that's the start of it, how we learn value in ourselves. Now, these stages, if you look them up, you can miss on those virtues and those lessons you learn, but you can always learn those later in life. I actually had to learn those later in life. I come from a family I was very sheltered. My mom, out of love, tried to shelter us and do everything for us. It's funny. My brother actually, my mom did his laundry till he was a late teen, until he was like a senior or junior in high school. She even cut up his food for him until that period. So that's kind of extreme, but that's kind of what happens. Now, she didn't do that out of making him dependent on her. Like, that was her intention. Her intention was, I provide care and I serve and I feel like I have purpose from that. Which is not a bad thing. But even now, he struggles, my brother, to be confident in his choices and decisions because he's always been over-nurtured in that way. So, long rant short, there's different reasons why we can learn not to care for ourselves, right? Maybe we model that off of someone else, like talking about my mom. Or maybe it was a friend, but typically it's your parental figure. Maybe they were like that, and you try to live up to that. Or you learn that's maybe your gender role. That's what you do, right? You don't worry about yourself. You always put everyone else on top of your needs. And I would even have you question, if you're a parent, that you need to take care of yourself. You should be higher in that priority. I wouldn't say, maybe not higher, but on the same tier of priority as your kids, right? Because it goes through the same thing. If your priority, because how many shows have you watched of parents putting themselves here and their kids here, and they are in poor health, right? They are in poor emotional health, and the only thing that keeps them going is their kids, and then what happens? They become adults, and they are lost, right? So, we need to care for ourselves, right? We need to make sure we are healthy physically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. So what I mean by socially, we need to have relationships, right? We were designed as humans to be social creatures. A lot of times, especially in work environments, when we don't see a lot of people, we kind of feel sad, right? That's why I think a lot of us, not all, a lot of us enjoyed school or college environment. I love both. I love college and school both because I got to hang out with a whole bunch of people, right? And that's why there's an adjustment when you go to a certain work field. Maybe that your work field is similar, where you work with a lot of people. Like my work field is kind of like that. But maybe you work somewhere that you're alone most of the time. That can be a big shock to your system. So that can be challenging, right? So, in emotional health, that is kind of like your your emotions, your feelings, and then them being validated and listened to. And physical health, imagine, is your body eating well, exercising, sleeping, and that's a whole nother lesson we'll get into. In your spiritual health, which is a lot of times as a counselor, I don't get into this, but it is an important factor. It doesn't mean that always it has to be God or in that spiritual religious sense. It could also just mean finding meaning and purpose in something that's outside of you, right? You are contributing something, that you are helping the community. Okay, so why should we care for other people, right? So we just really we'll get in more in depth some other time of why you should care for yourself, right? But why should you care for other people? Because there is benefit from hurting people, right? Like, people always get onto bullies, right? But we don't really think of the intention of why, like when like when someone is doing things that put people down and hurt them, we say that's bullying. We need to punish that, which is true. But we also need to figure out what the intention from that bully, what are they getting out of it? And we need to address that. How they can meet that need in a more healthy, appropriate way. And where do they learn that? Where do they learn how they meet that need, like power or attention, by hurting other people? And most likely, they learned it at family, at home. They could have learned it from TV that they're watching. They can learn it from whatever environment. Either something that's happened to them personally or something they've watched. Maybe they'll watch their dad belittle their mom all of their life, and that's how dad makes himself feel better, right? That's just one example. But we do get things from people. Think about manipulation tactics. There's probably 7 or 8 of them, right? Threatening, being physical, badgering, guilt tripping, buttering up, bribing. Those are all things kids utilize, right? Not just kids, adults too. But you are, in a sense, hurting them in some of those tactics to get something, right? Threatening. I've worked with family after time where the parent, in good nature, giving in, and it's not entirely their fault. Like, you gotta think in their shoes. A lot of these parents are single parents, and they have been spread thin, and so when it comes to be consistent with rules and boundaries, it's hard to. It's very hard to, but we need to strive to try to be consistent. So, with a kid, and I have a conversation about the kids I work with time and time again about how manipulation does hurt them, but as long as they're getting something out of it, yes, they feel guilty about it, but then they also get the reward, right? For example, the kid who throws a tantrum at the store and the parent gives them a toy to get them to shut up, right? And any parents out there, don't do that. It's the worst thing you could do, because what does that tell them? That tells them I can manipulate to get what I want, right? So, and I'm not saying that's going to be a habit all their life, because eventually they'll have consequences for that, right? I manipulate my friend or girlfriend or whoever, and they'll stop being my friend, right? So in the situation with the family, some families turn into punching bags, right? And it goes right along what we're talking about, self-care, and they allow them to use them as a punching bag, and they don't do anything, have those appropriate boundaries, because their self-worth and value is down, right? So, and sometimes that becomes normal. Think of like abuse situations in couples. It's normalized, right? So, I go back to that question. Why should we care for other people, right? So hopefully you're thinking what I said earlier, that we're social creatures, right? We have happiness. It's a need that we have Someone I liked, I read his book, is William Glasser in Reality Therapy. He has 5 basic needs, right? And one of them is caring for yourself and other people. So think when you have, there's 4 other needs, when those are met, but you don't have anyone in your social circle that you connect with, right? Those people tend not to be happy. Think about the people, you've heard stories of, like, you have a lot of money and yachts and things, and they buy toys and after, again, but they don't have the person, anyone to share it with, and they're sad. They have all their other needs met, but they're sad still, right? So that's one reason. Second reason is because no matter how strong you are, you can't do everything yourself. Having a support system, having people in your corner can get you through some dark times. And there's situations that happen to us that are just so difficult to get through. Life can be so great and so happy, but life can bring a lot of discomfort and misery. You know what I mean? So having people in your corner really helps with that. And if you're there for people, those people will tend to be there for you. So that's why that is a need a lot. And I always and it's even harder now with COVID, but luckily we have this right here, an online social community that we can have to feel supported. Not so it doesn't have to be in a physical sense, but it can be, in an emotional sense, right? I mean, you can have face-to-face video chat, So we have it's just a basic need we have, and 2, we can't do everything ourselves. We're going to fall at some point in time. We're going to need help, right? Makes me think I can go off the topic, talk about attachment styles, but I'm not going to do that in this video, because I could just sit here and talk for 3 hours and ramble about all kinds of stuff. I'm trying to stay on topic. This is the first one I usually talk about. So, and the third reason, I've already said previously how we fall in this trap of helping other people. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel purpose. It makes us, it can make us feel like I said earlier, giving back to the community, finding a purpose greater than yourself and helping other people. A lot of the people who are in professions, including my own, tend to end up in those places because they are seeking that purpose, and they feel good when they help other people. Now, I'm not saying it's always easy every day. I know personally, when I worked in more of a clinic setting, not typically what I'm doing, I do a lot of groups and some individuals now, but now I just saw individuals. It was very taxing, on you, So you still had to have that self-care and take care of yourself, like we're talking about, before I could help other people, right? So, hopefully there are some good notes that you end up taking, and I will come back to this subject a lot. But typically my discussions involve questions, so they usually last more like 15 minutes, 45, but it's just me ranting to a camera, so it's probably like 25, 30 minutes. But it's on here, and hopefully this dialogue has got you thinking, and somehow it relates into your life. And so if any questions or anything you want me to keep talking more about, put them in the comments below. Subscribe if you enjoy watching me. I plan on doing a weekly topic lesson. We're going to talk, and like I said, part of the reason is to help other people. If as long as a couple of people find value in this, I'm happy with that. And also, this will always be there for the kids I'm currently serving. So I think I'll end it there. But I hope everyone has a great day. And any feedback, any suggestions, I would much appreciate it. And if you subscribe and like the video, I'd also appreciate it. I know that YouTube and the YouTube world, that affects some kind of I can't even say the word right now, but it affects it in some way. So you guys have a great day. I'm going to head off here. Take care.